cold of space was a myth. The real cold was the silence inside the UNS Requiem. For 5 years, that silence had been the only constant, a low, humming void where the ghosts of 27 billion dead whispered their last rites. Captain Eva Rostova felt it in the recycled air, a chill that had nothing to do with the cryosystems and everything to do with memory. She stood on the command deck, a wraith in a dark gray uniform, her reflection a pale smudge against the star-dusted infinity of the forward viewport. Outside, the Charon Nebula bled across the black canvas like a cosmic wound, its vibrant purples and reds a mockery of the monochrome world humanity now inhabited. They were the forgotten, the excised, the species deemed too volatile for the grand, harmonious tapestry of the Galactic Compact. The Compact's official decree called it a quarantine, a gentle word for a death sentence. They severed humanity's interstellar connections, collapsed the jump gates that were mankind's lifelines, and declared Earth and its colonies a biohazard, an unstable element to be contained and left to wither. But they hadn't counted on humanity's talent for spite. They hadn't counted on the survivors turning their containment into a crucible. Rostova's fingers traced the faint scar above her eyebrow, a memento from the fall of Helios 7th, the day the Compact's fleet, led by the imperious Cathar, had glassed her home colony from orbit while broadcasting a message of peace and stability to the rest of the galaxy. They called it a necessary sterilization. Eva called it murder. Now, 5 years later, the Requiem was the culmination of that rage, a ghost ship built in the dark, forged from the salvaged bones of abandoned asteroid mines and powered by a cold fusion core that screamed where humanity could no longer. It was a spear aimed at the heart of an empire that thought it had already won. Status on the ghost signal. Lieutenant Eva's voice was low, a gravelly echo of what it once was. It never fully recovered from the ash and screams of Helios 7. Still broadcasting. Captain. Lieutenant Gia Kenner replied from the comm station, his face illuminated by the soft blue glow of his console. He was young, born just before the quarantine, his entire life shaped by loss and the singular, burning purpose of revenge. Clean, repeating loop, compact standard diplomatic channel. An old one, deactivated right after the gates went down. They never thought we'd have the reach to listen. They never thought a lot of things. Ava muttered, her gaze fixed on the nebula. Magnify the source. A section of the viewport shimmered, zooming in on a pinpoint of light. That was not a star. It was a derelict space station, a relic from the era of cooperation, a time when humans and the other species of the Compact had shared knowledge and ambition. The station, Sanctuary, was supposed to have been decommissioned, a monument to a failed friendship. Instead, it was singing. The signal was a simple string of code, a sequence of prime numbers followed by a data packet that, on its own, meant nothing. But Ava's people had spent 5 years sifting through the wreckage of their history, piecing together the digital ghosts the Compact had tried to erase. An old contact, a disgraced Cathar archivist who owed her a life debt, had given her the key before he disappeared. The prime numbers weren't a message, they were a lock. The data packet was the keyhole. Combined, they pointed to a location, a set of coordinates hidden inside the Compact's most sacred archives. They pointed to the Alpha Vault. The Alpha Vault was a myth, a bedtime story the Compact told its children about the genesis of their union. It was said to hold the original charters, the foundational treaties signed by the first races, but it was also rumored to hold their secrets. The dirty compromises and unspoken crimes that were the true bedrock of their peaceful empire. It was where the original order to quarantine Earth was stored, not the sanitized version fed to the galaxy, but the real one, with the signatures of those who had condemned humanity to a slow, agonizing death. Finding that document, that proof of a galaxy-wide conspiracy, was the first step. Exposing it was the second. Annihilation was the third. The Cathar fleet is stationed at the Cygnus threshold. 10 light-years from our position, Commander Reese Valerius announced from the tactical station, his voice a steady baritone that cut through the deck's tension. He was a veteran of the pre-quarantine fleet, a man who had watched his comrades die defending gates the Compact had already slated for destruction. His grief had long ago calcified into cold, hard resolve. They're the designated guardians of the sector. Getting to the vault means going through them. We aren't going through them, Eva said, turning from the viewport. The light from the nebula caught the silver in her dark hair, making her look spectral. We're going around. The Cathar are arrogant. Their patrols are predictable. Their sensor nets designed to detect brute force, not a whisper. The Requiem was built for this. Full stealth profile. We drift through the asteroid field on the system's edge, powered down to a heartbeat. We will be a rock, a shadow, until we are past their lines. And the vault itself, Reese asked. Compact records describe it as impenetrable, quantum-locked, sentient AI defense systems, a garrison of their elite Praetorian Guard. The archivist gave us more than coordinates, Ava said, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. He gave us their sins. The Vault's AI, chronicler, and wasn't just built to protect the archives. It was designed by a race the Cathar later sterilized for genetic impurity. The AI's core programming contains a backdoor, a failsafe coded into its very being by its creators. A final act of defiance, a single line of code, a digital ghost from a dead race. We transmit that code, and Chronicler will see us not as intruders, but as saviors. A heavy silence settled over the bridge. It was a plan born of desperation and fueled by the ghosts of the past. It was insane. It was perfect. Gia Kenner swiveled in his chair, his young face a mask of awe and trepidation. Captain, if we get that file, the original quarantine order. We broadcast it, Eva finished, her voice turning to ice. We broadcast it to every planet, every colony, every listening post in the galaxy. We show the minor races of the Compact how their Cathar masters built an empire on lies and genocide. We turn their alliance into a civil war. We let them burn from the inside out. While they tear each other apart, we will move to Phase 2. Phase 2 was a word whispered only in the darkest corners of the fleet, a plan so audacious and terrible that it was known only to high command. It was not about justice. It was about erasure. The Cathar homeworld, Cathar Prime, orbited a volatile star. Humanity, in its final days of galactic contribution, had designed and built the massive solar regulators that kept the planet's atmosphere stable and shielded it from the star's lethal radiation. Those regulators had override codes, known only to a handful of human engineers, most of whom died on Helios 7. But one had survived. One had passed those codes to Ava. Phase 2 was turning off the sun. Bring us to the edge of the Cathar sensor net, Ava commanded, her voice ringing with an authority that left no room for doubt. Run silent. Power down all non-essential systems. I want us to be a whisper in the dark." The Requiem slid into the asteroid field, its advanced hull plating shifting to mimic the thermal and electromagnetic signature of the surrounding rock. On the main screen, the Cathar fleet appeared as a series of serene green icons, a wall of power and order. They were lions guarding a gate, unaware of the serpent slithering beneath their paws. For 3 days, the crew of the Requiem lived in near total darkness and silence. The air grew stale, the temperature dropped, and the only sounds were the soft clicks of consoles and the steady breathing of the 100 souls on board. They ate cold rations and spoke in hushed tones, their every movement a prayer against detection. Ava lived on the bridge, sustained by stimulants and the sheer force of her will. She watched the green icons of the Cathar fleet, her hatred a living thing, a cold fire in her gut. She remembered the face of the Cathar admiral who had given the order to fire on Helios 7th. His face had been projected across the sky, a monument of alien condescension. Speaking of galactic peace, even as plasma lances boiled the oceans and turned cities to glass. She had sworn an oath that day, a promise made to the ghosts of her family and her world. She would not just defeat the Cathar, she would unmake them. She would erase their history, salt their earth, and ensure their name became a curse, whispered only in tales meant to frighten children. On the 4th day, they were past the main patrol line. The Alpha Vault loomed ahead, a colossal structure of shimmering white alloy and dark, unyielding obsidian. It was carved into a rogue planetoid, a fortress adrift in a sea of black. It exuded an aura of ancient, untouchable power. "We are in position," Reese reported, his voice tight. "No signs of detection. The vault is just as the records described. It's formidable." "So were we. Once," Eva said quietly. She turned to Gia. "Prepare the transmission, the fail-safe code. Send it on a tight beam, directly to the vault's primary comms spire, and pray the archivist wasn't lying." Gia's fingers flew across his console. The air on the bridge crackled with an almost unbearable tension. Every person held their breath. This was the moment. If the code failed, the vault's defenses would vaporize them in an instant. If it worked, they would hold the soul of the Galactic Compact in their hands. "Transmitting now," Gia whispered. A thin line of light, invisible to any eye, shot from the Requiem and touched the vault. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. The vault remained silent, impassive, a god of stone and secrets. Ava's hand clenched into a fist, her knuckles white. Then, a change. A series of soft, emerald lights flickered to life along the vault's equator, a gentle, welcoming glow in the oppressive darkness. A channel opened on their comms. There was no voice, only a single line of text appearing on the main screen, written in the flowing, elegant script of a long-dead language. Ava stepped forward, her shadow falling across the glowing console. She looked at the words, the final gift of a murdered people, and felt a kinship that transcended species. She keyed the response herself, her fingers steady. The colossal blast doors of the Alpha Vault, doors that had not opened in 1,000 years, began to slide apart. A cavernous opening appeared, spilling a soft, golden light into the void. It was an invitation, an open wound. The Requiem, a ship named for the dead, slid from the shadows and entered the heart of its enemy. As they passed through the threshold, The silence of the ship was finally broken by a single, sharp exhale from Rhys Valerius. "My God," he breathed. "We're in." Eva stood unflinching, her gaze locked on the glowing interior of the vault. They were in. But this was not the end. It was the beginning. The lies of the Galactic Compact were buried here, and she had brought a shovel. She would dig up the bones of their pristine history and hang them in the sky for all to see. And then she would bring the fire. The silence of vengeance was over. The symphony of destruction was about to begin. The interior of the Alpha Vault was not a sterile archive of data crystals and servers. It was a cathedral built to the god of history. The golden light they had seen from the void emanated from the very walls, a soft, warm luminescence that pulsed with the slow, steady rhythm of a sleeping heart. Vast, silent halls stretched into an impossible distance, lined with crystalline pillars that contained shimmering, holographic records of civilizations long turned to dust. The air was still and cool, carrying the faintest scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and clean, like the air after a lightning storm on a world that had never known pollution. As the Requiem drifted silently into a colossal docking bay designed for ships 100 times its size, the voice of the chronicler returned, not through the comms, but as a resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the ship's own hull, a vibration that every crew member felt deep in their bones. The text on the main screen flowed in time with the hum. Ava Rostova stepped closer to the screen, her crew watching her, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and reverence for the sacred space they were violating. This place was the soul of the compact, and she was here to perform an exorcism. "We seek the Genesis file of Quarantine Protocol 734. Ava spoke the words into the open air, her voice clear and cold, trusting the AI to hear her. "The original, unredacted record. We are here to bear witness to the crime." The golden light in the chamber intensified for a moment, and the hum deepened in pitch. A single, brilliant beam of golden energy projected from the ceiling, painting a path down a central causeway that seemed to float over a chasm of swirling, starlit data. "Commander Valerius, you have the bridge," Eva ordered, turning to face a small, hand-picked away team. "Keep the Requiem on a hair trigger. If I send a single burst distress call, you get our people out of here, with or without me. You know the mission." Rhys nodded, his expression grim. "We will not leave without the file. Captain? Or you?" Eva allowed herself a brief, tight nod before turning to her team. It consisted of Gia Kenner, whose technical skills were needed to interface directly with the vault systems, and 2 heavily armed Marines, their black armor a stark, profane intrusion in this luminous sanctuary. As they stepped onto the causeway, the gravity shifted, becoming light and buoyant, as if they were walking through memory itself. The chronicler began to fill the silence, not with words, but with images. The crystalline pillars on either side of them flared to life, projecting scenes from the compact's history. They saw the signing of the first charter, a beautiful and hopeful assembly of beings from a dozen worlds. They saw the Cathar, then a minor, warrior caste race, vowing fealty to the more ancient and wise races. Then the images darkened. They saw the chronicler's own creators, a graceful insectoid species called the Signians, being honored for their technological contributions. The next pillar showed the Signians being led away in chains by Cathar soldiers. their cities burning in the background under the pretext of a genetic plague. The official compact record called it a mercy. Ava saw it for what it was, the first of many stepping stones on the Cathar's bloody ascent to power. "It knows," Gia whispered, his eyes wide as he stared at the holographic genocide. "It's showing us this for a reason. It thinks we are here to correct the record," Ava said, her voice a low growl. "It thinks we want justice. It has no concept of what our justice looks like." The causeway led them to a vast, circular chamber. In the center, a sphere of black. Liquid-like material pulsed with its own internal light. This was the core archive, the place where the most protected data was held. The AI communicated, its hum tinged with something that felt like sadness. As Gia approached the sphere to begin his work, a new series of holograms appeared in the air around them. It wasn't history this time. It was a conversation, a secret meeting. Eva recognized the figures instantly. The Cathar High Chancellor, his face a mask of regal arrogance, and beside him, to her shock, was an ambassador of the Lumerians, a species of luminous, energy-based beings that had declared neutrality during the quarantine, expressing public sorrow but offering no aid. They had been seen as passive victims of the Compact's brutal realpolitik. The recording told a different story. Humanity's expansion is too aggressive. The Cathar Chancellor's recorded voice echoed in the chamber. Their adaptive nature makes them an unpredictable variable. The Lumerian ambassador shimmered, its form coalescing into a more defined shape. Its voice was like the chiming of crystal bells, a sound that belied the poison in its words. They are also your chief economic rival in the Outer Territories. Their jump gate technology surpasses your own. A quarantine would not only contain their volatility, but would also see their trade routes and resource claims default to other Compact members, specifically to those who helped facilitate the transition. My people would be most grateful. Ava felt a fresh wave of cold fury wash over her. It wasn't just the Cathar. They had had help. The Lumerians, the galaxy's supposed pacifists, had helped write humanity's death warrant in exchange for profit. This changed things. Her plan had been simple: expose the Cathar, fracture the Compact, and pick apart the pieces. But if the Lumerians were complicit, broadcasting the truth would not just incite a civil war, it would cause the entire galactic structure to implode into a multi-front war of annihilation. It was more than she had hoped for. It was beautiful. "Captain," Gia said, his voice shaking as he pulled a data crystal from the core interface. "I have it. Protocol 734. The full, unredacted file. It's worse than we imagined. The signatures. The Lumerian ambassadors is right next to the Cathar Chancellors. There are notes in the margins. Speculations on acceptable human casualty rates. Projections on the timeline for our extinction." He held up the crystal as if it were a venomous snake. "This is it. This is the proof." Ava took the crystal, her fingers closing around the small, cold object that contained the condensed hatred of an entire galaxy. She felt a grim satisfaction, a sense of rightness that was as absolute and unforgiving as a law of physics. This was the fuel. This was the fire. "We're done here," she said, her voice tight. "Let's go home." But as she turned, the chronicler's golden light suddenly shifted to a blood red. The calming hum was replaced by a shrieking, discordant alarm that pierced the sanctified silence. The AI's text flashed frantically on a nearby wall. On the bridge of the Requiem, all hell broke loose. "Captain, we have multiple Cathar ships dropping out of hyperspace. Reese Valerius's voice yelled over the comms, laced with static and the scream of alarms. "They're boxing us in. They're hailing us, demanding our surrender." Ava's team sprinted back down the causeway, the holograms of history flickering and dying around them as the vault's power diverted to internal defenses. The golden light was gone, replaced by the stark, terrifying red of a lockdown. As they reached the docking bay, the massive blast doors were already beginning to grind shut. "Gia, get on board and help the commander," Eva shouted over the din. "We need to get these doors open. They can't be reopened from the inside without the Chronicler's consent." "And the Cathar alert has sent it into a protective lockdown," Gia yelled back, his face pale with terror. "Then we make our own exit." Ava slammed her fist on her comm unit. "Reese, do you read me? Loud and clear, Captain. The front door is closing. I want the Requiem's main cannon charged to 100%. On my mark. You are going to blow a hole in the side of this relic. We are leaving. Now." Outside the vault, the Cathar fleet, led by a colossal dreadnought, the Hand of Judgment, moved into an attack formation. Their weapons ports glowed with nascent energy. They thought they had trapped a rat. They had no idea they had cornered a dragon. Aboard the Requiem, Eva stood at the airlock, the precious data crystal clutched in her hand. She could see the Cathar ships gathering on the external monitors, their arrogance palpable even across the void. They believed they were the keepers of order, the arbiters of peace. She was about to teach them that the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't chaos. It was a species with nothing left to lose. "Reese," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm, "light them up." The UNS Requiem, a ship built for stealth and silence, began to glow. Its dormant weapon systems flared to life, its cold fusion core screaming as it shunted power to the ventral cannon. The ghost ship was about to roar. The hunt was over. The war had just begun. The Requiem's main cannon, a weapon designed in secret and tested only in the dead zones of dark space, fired not with a bang, but with a horrifying silence. A lance of pure, coherent energy, a white-hot needle of contained starfire, punched through the ancient alloy of the Alpha Vault as if it were parchment. The vacuum of space did the rest. A section of the docking bay wall, 100 meters wide, imploded, peeling away into the void in a silent, glittering cloud of shrapnel and frozen atmosphere. Alarms shrieked through the crippled station, its red emergency lights casting the human soldiers in a demonic glow. Eva Rostova and her team, braced against the explosive decompression, were nearly sucked into the black before the Requiem, its engines flaring with desperate power, maneuvered into the breach. The boarding ramp slammed down onto the ravaged deck. "Go, go now," Eva roared, pushing the two Marines ahead of her. They scrambled aboard, their magnetic boots barely holding as the vault's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Gia Kenner, clutching his console, was right behind them. Eva was the last to cross, turning for a final look at the desecrated sanctuary. The golden heart of the Galactic Compact was bleeding into the void, a fitting start to the chaos she was about to unleash. As she stepped onto the ramp, a searing pain shot through her leg. She looked down to see a jagged piece of the vault's hull, propelled by the explosion, had embedded itself deep in her thigh. Gritting her teeth against the agony, she ripped the shard out with a guttural cry and stumbled onto the ship, collapsing as the ramp sealed behind her. The bridge of the Requiem was a symphony of controlled chaos. "Captain's on board," Reese's voice boomed. "Get us out of here. Full power to the aft thrusters, evasive maneuvers." Now. The ship lurched, throwing Eva against the bulkhead. Through the viewport, she saw the Cathar fleet, momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity of their escape, finally react. Lances of plasma fire, brilliant streaks of emerald green, began to stitch the space where the Requiem had been. But the human ship was already a ghost, its advanced engines pushing it into a desperate, weaving flight through the debris field it had just created. "They're trying to lock us down with a tractor beam," Gia shouted from his station, his fingers a blur as he deployed countermeasures. "They're good. Damn good. I can't shake them for long." Ava, dragging her bleeding leg, pulled herself into the command chair. "We don't need long," she rasped, her vision swimming. She slapped a button on her armrest, and a medical drone whirred to life, its robotic arm extending to inject a potent cocktail of painkillers and coagulants into her wound. The fire in her leg subsided to a dull, throbbing ache. "Open a channel, all frequencies, unencrypted." Reese looked at her, his face a mask of disbelief. "Captain, they'll pinpoint our location in seconds." "That's the point," Ava said, her eyes glinting with a feral light. "It's time for the galaxy to hear the news." The channel opened. A cacophony of Cathar commands, battle chatter, and alarm signals filled the bridge. Eva ignored it. She keyed her own microphone, and her voice, raw and filled with the cold fury of 5 years of exile, cut through the noise. It was a voice that carried the weight of 27 billion ghosts. "This is Captain Eva Rostova of the United Naval Ship Requiem," she began, her words echoing across the stars. "To the scattered remnants of humanity, know this: we have not forgotten you. We have not been idle. Today, we have reclaimed our history." Her gaze was fixed on the Cathar dreadnought, the hand of judgment, now growing larger in the viewport. "To the so-called Galactic Compact, know this: your peace is a lie. Your unity is a sham, built on the bones of murdered species and cemented with the blood of those you deemed inconvenient." She held up the data crystal, ensuring the ship's external camera was focused on it. "I hold in my hand the original, unredacted Quarantine Protocol 734. I hold the proof of your conspiracy. I hold the signatures of the Cathar High Chancellor and his Lumerian accomplices, who condemned my species to extinction for profit and power." A hush fell over the Cathar comms. The fury of their commands was replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. They had been exposed. The sacred, untouchable truth had been stolen from their holiest of holies and was now being brandished like a weapon. "And now," Eva continued, a cruel smile twisting her lips, "you will all bear witness." She nodded to Gia. "Broadcast the file, every last byte. Attach it to this transmission. Let the galaxy see the rot at the core of their perfect union." Gia hit the command, and the data crystal's contents, the compact's darkest secret, became a poison arrow shot into the heart of their communications network. It spread like a virus, replicating, propagating, finding its way into every unsecured channel, every news feed, every planetary data net, from the core worlds to the furthest fringes of the outer rim. On 100 worlds, the faces of Cathar and Lumerian diplomats froze in horror on public view screens as their ancestors' crimes were laid bare for all to see. On the bridge of the Hand of Judgment, The Cathar admiral stared at his own screen, his mandibles clicking in disbelief and rage. The serpent had not only escaped its cage, it had returned with a venom that could dissolve an empire. "Destroy that ship," he roared, his voice shaking with a fury that transcended strategy. "I want nothing left but atoms." The hand of Judgment's primary weapon began to charge, a swirling vortex of energy gathering at its bow, a power great enough to crack a small moon. "They're powering their main cannon," Reese shouted. "Impact in 30 seconds. "It's too late for them," Eva said calmly. She watched the energy building, a miniature sun being born to kill them, and she felt no fear, only a profound, chilling sense of victory. "Gia, is the signal propagating?" "It's out, Captain." Gia confirmed, his face pale but his voice firm. "It's everywhere. They can't stop it now. The truth is free." "Then our work here is done," Eva said. "Prepare to jump." "Jump where?" Reese asked, confused. "Our jump drive is a short-range prototype. It can't get us out of the system, not with their fleet blocking every stable exit point." "We aren't making a stable exit," Eva replied, her eyes fixed on the Charon Nebula in the distance. The nebula was a treacherous graveyard of stars, a swirling chaos of radiation, gravitational anomalies, and dense particle clouds that no sane captain would ever enter. It was also their only hope. Plot a course directly into the heart of the nebula. A blind jump. Reese's blood ran cold. "Captain, the gravimetric shear will tear us apart. The radiation will fry our systems. If not us, it's suicide. Staying here is a death sentence." Eva countered. "In the nebula, we have a chance. The Cathar ships are too large, their shields too finely tuned for stable space. They won't be able to follow us. It's a gamble, but it's the only one we have." Reese hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then his training and his faith in his captain took over. He barked the orders. The Requiem's experimental jump drive began to whine, its core spinning up to an unstable, dangerous frequency. The ship shuddered violently, protesting the incredible strain. "Cannon will fire in 5, 4, Gia counted down, his eyes glued to his sensor readings. Outside, the Cathar dreadnought unleashed its fury. The beam of energy it fired was not a lance. It was a wave, a tsunami of annihilation that erased a section of the asteroid field as it surged towards them. 3, 2. The Requiem's jump drive shrieked, bending space-time around the ship, the viewport distorting into a swirl of impossible colors. 1. Just as the wave of death was about to consume them, the Requiem vanished. It didn't jump so much as it was violently shoved into another dimension, ripped from normal space and thrown into the roiling, chaotic heart of the Charon Nebula. The transition was brutal. The ship screamed as it was battered by gravitational waves, its hull groaning under pressures it was never meant to withstand. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into a terrifying darkness broken only by the hellish, purple glow of the nebula outside. And then, as suddenly as it began, the chaos subsided. The ship was still, adrift in a sea of incandescent gas and stellar dust. They were alive. A series of emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows across the bridge. "Damage report," Eva ordered, her voice hoarse. "Main power is offline," Reese reported, his voice strained. "Life support is on emergency backup. The jump drive is completely fried. Hull integrity is compromised, but holding. We're bleeding atmosphere from a dozen microfractures, but the auto-sealants are working." He looked up, his face grim in the red emergency lighting. "We're alive, Captain, but we're also stranded. Adrift in the most dangerous region of space known to man, with a crippled ship and a Cathar fleet that now has a blood debt to collect." Eva leaned back in her chair, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and the relentless throb of her wound. She looked out at the majestic, terrifying beauty of the nebula. They had done it. They had lit the fuse. Now, all they could do was listen for the explosion. Somewhere, out in the civilized galaxy, empires were starting to crack. Alliances were turning to ash. The peace they had known was a lie, and the truth was a firestorm. Her people, the last remnants of humanity, were trapped and bleeding in the dark. But they had given the galaxy a gift, the gift of war. And now, hidden in the beautiful chaos of the nebula, they would wait, and they would heal, and they would plan Phase 2 for a month. The UNS Requiem was a ghost in a haunted house, adrift in the swirling, ethereal currents of the Charon Nebula. The ship was a broken machine in a sea of cosmic fire. The crew worked in a state of perpetual twilight, bathed in the eerie purple and crimson glow that filtered through the viewports. Power was a jealously guarded commodity, rationed to maintain life support, and the damaged control systems that fought a constant, losing battle against the nebula's corrosive energies. The silence of deep space was replaced by the constant, unnerving symphony of the nebula, the whisper of charged particles against the hull, the low hum of gravitational eddies, and the occasional, violent crackle of a stellar flare erupting light years away. It was a place that frayed the nerves and preyed on the mind, a beautiful, deadly prison. Ava Rostova, her leg now scarred but functional, ran her ship with a quiet, unyielding intensity. She divided the crew into relentless, rotating shifts of repair and salvage. They cannibalized non-essential systems, rerouted power conduits, and patched the weeping hull with whatever materials they could fabricate. They were surviving on scraps, their rations low, their temper short, but their purpose burned brighter than the nascent stars around them. Their only connection to the outside world was a single, heavily shielded comms buoy, which Gia Kenner had managed to jury-rig. Once a day, for precisely 5 minutes, he would raise its antenna and drink from the torrent of galactic data, piecing together the chaos they had unleashed. The news was better and bloodier than Eva had ever dared to hope. The compact was not just fracturing, it was shattering. The broadcast of the unredacted quarantine protocol had been a spark in a galactic powder keg. The smaller, client races, long resentful of Cathar dominance, saw the truth not just as a crime against humanity, but as proof of the compact's fundamental hypocrisy. Riots had erupted on dozens of worlds. The Valyrians, a proud, reptilian species, had publicly seceded, their fleets engaging Cathar patrols along their shared border. The Lumerians, exposed as co-conspirators, had become galactic pariahs. Their luminous forms were now seen not as symbols of enlightenment, but of avarice. Their trade empire, once the envy of the galaxy, was collapsing as partners severed ties and embargoes were enacted. Their so-called neutrality was revealed as a coward's shield, and the galaxy was showing them no mercy. The Cathar, in their arrogance, had responded not with diplomacy, but with force. They declared martial law in several sectors. their fleets crushing descent with the same brutal efficiency they had used on Helios 7s. But this time, they weren't sterilizing a single isolated species. They were fighting a multi-front war against their own disillusioned allies, and they were losing. Their empire was burning, and Ava and her crew were huddled around the faint glow of the comms buoy, like survivors around a campfire, warming themselves on the flames. The Civil War is escalating, Gia reported during one of their bleak, twilight briefings on the bridge. The Cathar have recalled the Hand of Judgment and the bulk of the 7th Fleet back to their core worlds to quell rebellions. The fleet that was hunting us has been reduced to a skeleton crew, a few destroyers and patrol craft still sweeping the edge of the nebula. They think we're either dead or long gone. They're underestimating us again, Rhys Valerius grunted, his face gaunt from meager rations. It seems to be a species-wide character flaw. It's a flaw we are going to exploit, Eva said, her eyes tracing a schematic of their crippled ship on the main console. We've done enough damage to the hull to keep us afloat. The engines are another story. What's the status on the main drive? A weary-looking engineer on the screen shook her head. The jump drive is a write-off. Captain, a complete loss. The main sublight engines. We've bypassed the fried regulators and managed to restore about 30% power. We're not going to be outrunning any Cathar patrols, but we can move. Slowly. Slowly is all we need, Eva said. A new, dangerous idea had been forming in her mind, an idea born from their desperation and the unique properties of their prison. The Cathar think this nebula is a death trap. They see it as a chaotic, impassable barrier. But we've been living in it. We understand its currents, its dead zones, its hidden pathways. To them, it's a wall. To us, it's about to become a weapon. She brought up a star chart, overlaid with the data they had painstakingly collected on the nebula's bizarre properties. There's a gravimetric funnel here, she said, pointing to a swirling vortex of energy deep within the nebula's core. It's a natural, one-way slingshot, a river of bent space-time. Theoretically, if a ship entered it with precise timing and shielding, it could be accelerated to near-light speed and ejected thousands of light-years away. It's incredibly dangerous. The odds of being crushed into a singularity are significant. But the Cathar would never, ever expect it. And where does this river lead? Rhys asked, his skepticism warring with a glimmer of hope. Ava zoomed in on the projected exit point. A single, bright star appeared, surrounded by a halo of orbiting planets. It was a star that was burned into the memory of every soul on that ship. It leads home, she whispered, or what's left of it. The Helios system. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Helios 7. Eva's home. The world glassed and murdered by the Cathar. It was a graveyard, a monument to their loss. Why would we go back there? Gia asked, his voice barely audible. There's nothing left. That's what the Cathar believe, Ava countered, her voice hardening. They sterilized the surface. Yes, but they didn't destroy the planet's core, and they didn't know about the shelter. The shelter was Helios 7's deepest secret, a massive, self-sustaining subterranean ark built into the planet's mantle, designed to survive the very cataclysm that had befallen it. It was humanity's last resort, a final, desperate seed of survival. Ava was one of the few who knew its location, and she had always believed it was empty, that no one could have reached it in time. But now, it was their only sanctuary, their only hope of finding the resources to repair the Requiem and prepare for the final act of their vengeance. The shelter has the fabrication facilities, the power reserves, the resources we need to turn the ship from a crippled refugee vessel back into a dreadnought, she explained. And it's the last place in the universe the Cathar would ever look for us. We will hide in the shadow of our own tomb. The plan was insane. A slow, perilous journey through a cosmic maelstrom, a blind leap of faith into a gravitational slingshot that could kill them all to reach a dead world. But it was also a plan of stunning, poetic brilliance. It was a return to the source of their pain, a pilgrimage to the heart of their rage. It was a homecoming. For the next 2 weeks, every ounce of the crew's energy was devoted to preparing for the journey. They reinforced the hull with salvage plating, diverted all remaining power to the inertial dampeners and the forward shields, and plotted a course through the nebula's treacherous currents with the obsessive focus of monks illuminating a sacred text. The journey to the gravimetric funnel was a slow, agonizing crawl. The Requiem creaked and groaned like a living thing in pain, battered by radiation and buffeted by forces that defied known physics. They navigated by instinct and by the deep, intimate knowledge of the abyss they had gained during their exile. Finally, they arrived. The funnel was a terrifying sight, a whirlpool of swirling light and shadow that seemed to be pulling the very fabric of space into its maw. It did not hum. It roared, a deep, subsonic vibration that resonated through the ship's hull and into their bones. "This is it," Reese said, his hands gripping his console. "Once we enter, there's no turning back." Ava stood behind him, her hand resting on the back of his chair. She looked at the faces of her crew, reflected in the dark screens, tired, scared, but resolute. They were the last of their kind, a tribe of ghosts haunting the edges of a galaxy that had tried to erase them. "We were born from fire," she said, her voice quiet but carrying across the hushed bridge. "It's fitting we should be reborn in a storm. Take us in." The Requiem tipped its nose into the vortex. The acceleration was instantaneous and brutal. The ship was seized by an invisible, impossibly powerful hand and flung into the abyss. The inertial dampeners strained, glowing cherry red as they fought to keep the crew from being turned into paste against the bulkheads. The viewport showed nothing but a blur of pure, white light. Time itself seemed to stretch and compress. For a moment, that could have been a second or an eternity. They were nowhere and everywhere, a vessel of souls caught between the laws of the universe. And then, they were through. The violent roar was replaced by a sudden, profound silence. The blinding light resolved into the familiar, comforting pattern of stars. And there, dead ahead, was a single yellow sun, and orbiting it, a sphere of blackened, glassy rock that had once been a vibrant, living world. Helios 7. "We're home," Geo whispered, tears streaming down his face. As the Requiem limped towards the dead planet, a new signal suddenly appeared on their screens. It wasn't Cathar. It wasn't compact. It was an old human naval frequency, broadcasting on a tight, encrypted beam from the planet's surface. It was a simple, repeating message, a question. It was a code phrase, a recognition signal for the survivors of Helios 7th, a password to a tomb that Eva had believed was empty. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stumbled to the comms panel, her hands shaking as she keyed the response, the other half of a promise made a lifetime ago. "The ghosts who have returned," she transmitted, her voice cracking with an emotion she thought had died with her world. A moment of silence, and then the reply came, clear and strong, a voice from the grave. Eva Rustova, the vengeful wraith, the architect of galactic chaos, leaned against the console and wept. They were not the last. They were not alone. And the war was far from over. The descent to Helios 7th was a pilgrimage through a graveyard of memories. On the main viewport, the planet hung like a skull in the void, its surface a uniform, obsidian black, where oceans had once been sapphire and continents emerald. The Cathar plasma had burned it clean, cauterizing the world down to its bedrock, leaving behind a monument of polished agony. Eva Rostova stood on the bridge, her knuckles white as she gripped the command chair, her face an unreadable mask of stone. Every landmark of her childhood, the coastal city of Elysium, the Titan mountain range where she'd learned to climb, the sprawling university where she'd met her husband was now just a layer of glass and carbon. The ship shuddered as it entered the tortured atmosphere, and as they descended towards the coordinates transmitted from below, a section of the dead ground began to retract, revealing a chasm of impossible size. It was not a hangar, it was a wound in the planet, and from its depths, a soft, welcoming light bloomed. The Requiem slipped into the chasm, and the colossal doors sealed above them, plunging them into a new world, a world beneath the tomb. The shelter was not the cramped, military bunker Eva had imagined. It was a city, a vast, multi-leveled metropolis carved into the planet's mantle, lit by a colossal fusion core that mimicked the light of a sun. Hydroponic forests climbed the cavern walls, their green a shocking, vibrant defiance of the dead world above. Waterfalls cascaded into recycled reservoirs, and the air was clean and rich with oxygen. It was a ghost of Helios 7th, a perfect, heartbreaking memory hidden beneath the scars. As Eva and her crew stepped onto the docking platform, they were met not by soldiers, but by people. Hundreds of them. Their faces pale from a life lived underground, but their eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding light. An old man with a cascade of white hair and the calloused hands of an engineer stepped forward. "Captain Rostova," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am Elias Vance. I was the lead architect of this place. I never prayed it would be needed. When the sky began to burn, 500,000 of us made it down here." Eva stared at him, then at the crowds. She saw children, teenagers who had been born in this beautiful cage, who had never seen a real star or felt rain on their skin. Her mission had been fueled by the belief that they were the last, that they were avenging a species already extinct, but they were not an ending. They were a beginning. We thought we were all that was left," she managed to say, her voice tight. "So did we," Elias replied, a sad smile touching his lips. "For 5 years, we have listened to the silence, believing we were ghosts in our own home. Then we heard your broadcast. The truth. You gave us hope, Captain. And now, we will give you a sword." He led them from the docking bay into the heart of the shelter to a vast research and development complex that dwarfed anything the Requiem possessed. Here, The survivors of Helios Etsavis had not merely been surviving. They had been working for 5 years with the obsessive focus of the condemned. They had been studying the one thing they had in abundance, the residual energy signatures and technology of their murderers. The Cathar are masters of energy manipulation, Elias explained, his hand sweeping across a holographic display that showed a shimmering, impossibly complex star chart. Their homeworld, Cathar Prime, orbits a Class F giant, a star prone to violent, unpredictable solar flares. Their entire civilization depends on a network of massive solar regulators, orbital stations that contain and stabilize their sun's fury. Phase 2. Eva breathed, her eyes locking onto the schematic. We know. Our plan was to find the override codes and shut them down. Let their own star cook them. Elias shook his head slowly. Shutting them down is merciful. Captain, it is a slow death. We have learned to be less poetic. We have spent 5 years reverse engineering their regulator technology. We have found not an off switch, but an overdrive sequence. We cannot shut down their star. We can, however, make it scream. He brought up a simulation. It showed the Cathar system, the regulators working in harmony to shield the verdant world of Cathar Prime. Then, a single line of code was introduced into the network. The regulators, instead of dampening the star's energy, began to amplify it, to focus it. They turned their shield into a lens. The simulation showed a catastrophic, directed solar flare, a wave of plasma 1,000,000 kilometers long, erupting from the star. It did not strike the planet. It was far worse. It struck the star itself, triggering a chain reaction, a sympathetic detonation of the star's volatile photosphere. The result was a nova event, a localized, focused explosion that would vaporize everything in the inner system, from the orbital regulators to the fleet defending them, to the very surface of Cathar Prime itself. This isn't just killing a planet, Reese Valerius whispered, his face ashen as he stared at the simulation. This is erasing a solar system from the maps. They glassed our world, Elias said, his voice soft but cold as the void. We will turn theirs into a new star, a monument. We have the science. Captain, you have the delivery system. The Requiem can be repaired, upgraded. Its stealth systems, combined with a warhead carrying our code. You can get past their fleet. You can deliver our final message. There was no debate. There was no discussion of morality. On the bridge of a broken ship, surrounded by the ghosts of a dead world, there was only the cold, clear logic of retribution. The rage that had sustained Eva's crew was met and magnified by the focused, scientific hatred of the shelter's survivors. Together, they were not just a military force. They were a law of nature. They were an extinction event. For 3 months, the shelter became a shipyard. The Requiem was not just repaired, it was reborn. Its armor was replaced with a crystalline metallic alloy developed in the shelter's labs, capable of actively dispersing energy weapon impacts. Its engines were rebuilt, its power core enhanced, its stealth systems refined to a degree that could render it virtually undetectable until the moment it struck. It was no longer a ghost ship. It was a scalpel, designed for a single, perfect, cosmic surgery. And in its heart, it carried a new weapon, a single torpedo, the Helios seed, containing the code that would turn a sun into an instrument of unimaginable vengeance. As they prepared to depart, Elias Vance met Ava on the command deck. He handed her a small, worn data slate. My daughter was on the last transport to the university campus before the bombs fell, he said, his old eyes looking past her, into a memory. She was studying xenolinguistics. She believed that communication could bridge any gap. That understanding was the ultimate cure for fear. He looked at Eva, his gaze sharp and heavy. She was wrong. Some gaps can only be closed by fire. Do not hesitate. Captain, for our children, and for the children you saw here, who deserve to one day see a sky that is not a ceiling. The reborn Requiem rose from the tomb of Helios VII and turned its nose towards the heart of the dying compact. The journey was silent, a predator stalking its prey. The Galactic Civil War was still raging, but the Cathar had pulled their fleets into a defensive cordon around their home system, a final, desperate fortress. They were waiting for a warship. They were not prepared for a whisper. The Requiem slipped through their sensor nets like a phantom, its new stealth systems making it a hole in reality. They passed destroyers and battlecruisers close enough to see the insignias on their hulls. They were a dagger, sliding unseen between the ribs of a giant. At the center of the system, Cathar Prime gleamed, a jewel of blue and green, shielded by the humming, perfect ring of its solar regulators. And guarding it all was the flagship, the Hand of Judgment. "We are in position," Gia announced, his voice a tense whisper. "The torpedo is armed. We have a clear shot at the primary regulator." Eva looked at the planet on her screen. She saw the cities, the oceans, the clouds. It was alive. And she was here to be its end. She remembered the Cathar Admiral's condescending face, the screams of her people, the cold silence of the last 5 years. She remembered the children of the shelter, born in darkness. She thought of Elias Vance's daughter, the linguist who had believed in understanding. A wave of ice and fire washed through her. "Fire," she commanded. The torpedo launched, a silent, invisible streak of death. It impacted the central regulator and the code. The vengeful ghost of Helios VII poured into the Cathar network. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, every regulator in the system began to glow, their energy output surging, their shields reconfiguring. The Cathar fleet, sensing the energy spike, turned in confusion, their systems screaming with alarms they did not understand. Aboard the Hand of Judgment, the Admiral watched in horror as his own son, his source of life, was turned against him. A vast, impossibly bright tendril of plasma erupted from the star's surface, guided and focused by the regulators. It was a spear of God, aimed at the heart of their son. Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the Requiem, her reflection a pale smudge against the coming apocalypse. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel joy. She felt a profound, terrible, and final quiet. The silence of a debt, paid in full. The Cathar were not just defeated, they were unwritten. Humanity was no longer the victim. It was the reckoning. The ghosts of 27 billion souls were finally, horrifically, at peace. As the light of the dying star began to fill her viewport, she turned to her crew, her face calm and her voice steady. "Take us home.